But we're going to do it anyway. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for coming. I'm going to let each of the presenters introduce themselves, but I'm grateful to know all of them because we're doing exciting things, and it takes multiple people working together to accelerate a movement and make more things happen. So, Dave, we're going to let you go first,
Okay.
and I'll give you a couple signals when we get hit halfway, and uh, give you a reminder as we get close to the ending point, and then we'll open it up to the community for questions. So,
All right. That sounds great. Thanks, David. And nice to see everybody. My name is Dave Rice. I am in South Orange County, and I'm the president of the United Nations Association Orange County chapter. We are a nonprofit that supports the UN, the largest in the world, with 200 chapters in the US. Many are campuses, and then there are global chapters as well. And our mission is to really advocate for and support the mission of the UN, to educate our community about why it matters, and also the human rights that it promotes through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And as you'll see from our presentation, much about the Sustainable Development Goals, which has very much to do with well-being. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I've been involved in that role for about 4 years. I'm otherwise mostly retired, although seem busier these days than when I wasn't one of those lives. But very happy to be here and very interested in promoting this whole idea of how do we include well-being in our thinking in general, whether it's our economic thinking or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up a presentation that I'm going to go through fairly quickly to just describe kind of the effort that we're on right now in our chapter that's addressing a lot of this, called the Sustainable Impact Alliance. And then we'll talk a little more just about sort of the dashboard that we're creating and what we're measuring, especially on metrics around well-being. And then happy to open it up for questions. So let me go ahead and share. Can everybody see the screen okay?
we sure can.
We all good. Okay, great. So again, when I became involved with United Nations Association, I really didn't know about the Sustainable Development Goals. I didn't know about the UN's program to localize the goals in what it's called Local 2030. Local2030.org tells you all about that. But as I learned about it, it became clear that this was something that was really important and that would be a very good direction for our chapter to take on as a way to take this model or framework that is there with the sustainable goals and apply it locally here in our community in Orange County, and then with the goal of moving beyond with that. So again, just quick on the UN. The UN was established by the U.S. right after World War II, by the way, to really help maintain and promote peace and security throughout the world. And the main way to do that was to support economic and social development in countries, to ensure that all of their human rights were being met and that basic needs were being met, and ultimately that we would promote strong democracies and not enable autocracies to develop. That's its main mission. And all of this ended up with them creating in 2000 a set of 8 initial goals for the world. These first 8 that you see here: end poverty, hunger, healthcare, quality education, gender equality, water, energy. And they set targets for these in a 15-year period. And by 2015, they found that they had a lot of buy-in from the world community on these. And in fact, poverty and hunger metrics, they had reduced in half globally, which was a big win. It was a big positive thing. And so they said when they got to 2015, let's do this again. It's a good idea. It's applying basically fundamental business concepts to our social issues by providing targets and driving goals and collaboration. But let's add 9 more goals, mostly around climate. If you all recall that 2015 was when the Paris Accord came out for the climate initiative, the only worldwide global agreement on climate. And so all of that happened, and with goal number 17 probably being the most important, saying we can't achieve these goals unless we figure out how to truly partner up and collaborate, meaning get everybody out of their silos and get beyond our identities and work together. So that's kind of the main goal here. Uh, People often don't understand that the world really needs the UN. And, it certainly doesn't help today's environment when, once again, we've defunded our participation as a country with the UN, which is 1/5 of its budget. Obviously, there's been all these other cuts to humanitarian groups as well. But the work that it does is so important. As I mentioned, really focusing on strong democracies and minimizing autocracies. It assists countries with elections, provides food and assistance to millions, vaccines distribution, protects many refugees more and more today than ever, works with a lot of organizations. And then on conflict, it has a volunteer force of 100,000 plus peacekeeping forces that really do a lot to do a lot of this work. By the way, they're 1/10 of the cost of one of our military personnel. So it makes a lot of sense to have UN peacekeeping forces out there doing a lot of this good work. And then, of course, the water and the climate crisis and human rights and much around women's rights and so much more. So with the idea of taking the sustainable goals model and bringing it here locally, this is really something that then required an overall plan and framework. And the vision here is really to create and provide a future where all residents, regardless of where they're at, deserve to thrive in a sustainable, inclusive community with a strong economic, vibrant neighborhoods and a healthy environment. People think of Orange County as a fairly, well-off county overall. There's pockets of it that are, but there's also strong pockets that really aren't. And in Santa Ana, Costa Mesa, Fountain Valley, we have, a lot of very underserved and very strongly needy people. So there's a need to make sure that we're inclusive with everything we do. But overall, as we look at what the major needs are that most of us in our communities are facing, this is a pretty good list and a representation, and I think we'll all agree of what those issues really are. Obviously, the environment and climate, but affordable housing probably right at the top of the list right now. And then with that, homelessness and mental health, we have still major issues, probably more today than ever, on equity and inclusion. There's education, workforce development, and then a bunch of issues around crime. A lot more, but these are some of the main ones I'm sure we'd all agree. So these are the things that need to be addressed in a more effective and collaborative and data-driven way that we really don't have today. And so that's the idea here behind the Sustainable Impact Alliance. Really serves as a hub for the delivery of these tools, focusing on what I call an SDG data dashboard. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And so again, the goal is to connect leaders from across our industry segments in a community, from academia, business, nonprofit sector, and the governments to work together and get out of their own silos and really join forces on shared initiatives, shared plans, and hopefully shared data-driven priorities and strategies and initiatives to, address these and create a much more accelerative and collective positive impact on our issues. So this does require breaking down silos, which is one of the hardest things I think we'd all agree to accomplish for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of good reasons why academia stays in silos and nonprofits and so forth and businesses. But we need to really work to come together, and the idea of an alliance, just like the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, is a very similar concept to be able to help do that. So again, we're pulling these groups together, and then the key actions would be to incubate and share solutions, address challenges, and implement strategies then at the local level that can be delivered. So the plan for this is to get a task force going, which we've done, assess current initiatives that are happening in the community. We don't want to reinvent a wheel. Develop partnerships throughout the community in all the various industry segments, and we've made a lot of progress there, particularly at the university level, but beyond as well. Secure funding for this, and we're making good progress on that. And then, very importantly, create a prototype, develop an AI-based platform that unifies data and presents it in meaningful ways. And we want to use the latest immersive technologies with Web 3.0 and so forth. And again, I'll talk a little more about that. And then we want to be able to, with that, track progress and then continue to enhance that overall dashboard so that we can continue to measure things that are important, that matter, and then roll this whole model out to other communities throughout California, Southern California, and beyond. This is really a picture of what the overall framework looks like. So this would be these industry groups that would identify leaders to come and agree that they want to take ownership of these issues in their community and set priorities and set targets for the community, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year targets. And then we would have these focus teams or really issues teams on all the various issues that would pull folks together across industry to, again, have overall strategic plans, to know who's doing what already in the space, to pull those groups together, and importantly, to identify where's the data that we need to really be able to attract and track progress in that space. That's a major focus. And then to make recommendations on initiatives so that leaders can then prioritize what kind of initiatives do we really go after, what are the budget priorities, et cetera. And all of this is importantly driven by this whole idea of a data platform. So really overall, then the whole goal is to have a better way to address and solve the problems that we have today. If you really look at how civil society deals with our issues today, we'd all agree, I think, that it's a broken system. We do not have plans, targets, accountability, transparency, and ways to really make sure that any money or resources that goes into it is effectively used. And most importantly, as well, as mentioned, we really just don't have the kind of collaboration that we need. So this can really help, achieve a lot of that and resulting in a level of accountability we just don't have today. Mentioned the industry teams, what their goals are to identify these leaders. We mentioned the focus teams to, identify who's doing what already in the communities on these issues, make them aligned, and understand where the data is so we can start bringing that into our dashboard. And so again, can't stress enough the importance of collaboration and that how we just can't get there without it, SDG 17. So at the end of the day, this results in giving us a thriving and sustainable economy, which is very important. We need to find economic business models that drive the well-being economy, meaning how do we grow our economies while not doing harm, but while doing good, right? While promoting well-being. I like to refer to that as the Hippocratic economic model, in addition to it's do no harm at a minimum, but let's also work on promoting well-being with our economy. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we have equity and inclusion for all voices. That becomes very key. And then we want to figure out what can we do to really engage our community, particularly young people today who are very, very focused on sustainability, on climate, on the environment, but really wanting to know what can they do to be more effective, to have a voice, to be a strong advocate. So all these become very important. And then also really developing field is the idea of smart cities, smart buildings, smart cities where we get sensors, where we're able to really, with the help of data and AI, increase efficiencies in the delivery of services to everybody throughout cities, whether it's transportation or other services. And from a data dashboard perspective, very importantly, helps enable us to have access to far more data sources that we call real-time data sources. And those are the sources that we really are after ultimately, so that we can have online real-time sort of access to the data that's required. So all this, in summary, comes together to give us a collective promise that we can make together to enhance the well-being, protect natural resources, and foster economic prosperity, emphasizing social equity and inclusion, and it ensures accountability, transparency, and collaboration by our leaders while enabling effective community engagement. That's the idea of the Sustainable Impact Alliance, and I just wanted to point out two other things in the couple minutes I have left, maybe 1 minute. One is the fundraising initiative that we've got going on right now for the dashboard. So we have launched the dashboard team within this last month. I see Joe Hood on the call. He's part of our team. And we're raising 50,000 right now for a development team that's helping us create a visually dynamic, data-rich platform to track local environmental metrics, and it's using um, all of this immersive extended reality display technologies to transform complex data into educational public art experiences. And we're very excited to have a team that we're partnering with that's been working in this space with the UN for 15 years to use digital art as a way to educate the masses around the world. They'll be at Climate Week in New York in a week and a half, planning on being there with them. So this makes all of this ultimately accessible to everyone through this latest Web3 technology, whether it's on your desktops or smartphones, headsets, or whatever. So that's the idea there. And we're focusing initially for our pilot MVP, if you will, on SDG 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. And here you'll find if you go to just the Wikipedia on SDG 11, you may not be able to read this, but David, I gave you this link and happy to put it in the chat for you.
It's in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, good. This just tells you what are the 11 metrics associated with sustainable cities and communities that we plan on focusing on with our pilot initial project. And you can see the first one is safe and affordable housing, right? How important is that for sustainable cities? And then affordable and sustainable transport systems. And then sustainable and inclusive urbanization, including urban planning, making sure that we've got people from the community involved in that, protecting the world's and our communities' cultural and natural heritage sites, reducing the adverse effects of natural disasters. I'm very involved in an issue and an initiative right now on the nuclear waste from the San Onofre plant. Happy to talk with anybody offline about that. That's an issue. Reduce the environmental impacts of cities, provide access to safe and inclusive green and public spaces, have strong regional and national development planning. So you can see here that there's a lot of very relevant targets that we're going to be pursuing that are very much all related to the idea of well-being for all. So those are my remarks. That's the presentation. I know it's a lot, and I hope that gives you a good sense of what we're doing. And now I'm happy for any questions or discussion.
Awesome. Dave, that was great. Thank you so much. So for those who haven't been here a while or who don't know, we'll take people, go ahead and raise your either physical hand or virtual hand. Virtual hand might be a little better, so I make sure I see you. And we try and ask people to actually keep it to one question and an actual question as opposed to their own project, et cetera, et cetera. We've got about 15 minutes for after each of the three presentations to ask the presenter questions. So open up. Jorge, please go ahead.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Dave, for quickly giving all this big picture of what your plans are. I'd love to learn more about it. Maybe we can connect. But the first question that came to me was when you identify the areas of focus and you have those 10 blocks in the image. Is that the way it's prioritized? You know, the
Yeah,
three or
good
four,
questions.
four, two,
Right.
and what metrics are for each one of them?
Okay, good question. Thank you. That's an example of what most of us are probably experiencing as top issues in our communities. But the idea here is that this is a community by community initiative. So it's up to the leaders who are going to become the assigned sort of leaders within the alliance for that community to really make those determinations for what the priorities are in their communities. And then also, where's the biggest payback, right? Of where can they invest the resources? How can we really get the best return, for that? So that's again a way to engage both our leaders in a more collaborative, meaningful way, and also, with citizen, involvement and impact being really huge. Great question, and I'll put my contact info in the chat as well.
Great. Monica.
Hi, thanks, David. What are the common objections to collaborating and how can they be overcome?
I would say in a word, dollars. It's much about money. Whether it's in the nonprofit space where you've got, sponsors and donors that you want to protect, or members, or whether it's in the academic space where you've got folks getting sort of recognition based on their research work and so forth. And obviously we see in the business world how difficult that has been. I came from the business world. We had a term called co-opetition. I think the Japanese have a keiretsu concept where sometimes folks actually do collaborate in a space, but by and large, that doesn't happen very well. And then I don't know, have you found government, folks really doing a great job collaborating? I mean, it just seems to be inherent in our organizational structures somehow, but I think a lot of it really boils down to money.
And how do we overcome that? Like, what's the new paradigm that's going to allow
Yeah,
us to reach these
yeah,
entities to recognize that there is benefit to
exactly.
collaborating, that it's almost like going from a zero-sum game to
Yeah,
a positive sum game. And how do we
yeah.
on people to that perspective?
It's such a good discussion. We could have a whole discussion on this. It's such a central point. But really, we have to create wins. It's a win-win situation. How can we change the narrative to, create a win for this collaboration and break through this financial barrier gap, right? So what are alternative solutions for financing for the nonprofit sector, for example? Right? We've developed a way to come up with a business that's a sustainable solutions business to help fund our nonprofit. And we want to break through that whole old barrier model, right? The model there that creates a barrier and things like that. But it's messaging, it's this kind of sort of work, but we just have to shift the narrative. In the climate space, we're really all focusing on the economic benefit of climate change and of green solutions. And more, it's clear that those are less costly today than staying with non-green solutions. But we all have to be better at communicating that and focusing on that. So again, it's a huge important area.
Thanks.
Thank you. Rebich, and pardon me for if I've mispronounced.
Oh, no, you're just fine. Apologies for being off camera. Um, One comment, I do agree that there is a financial bottom line, and we have to have some incentivization of behavioral change that has an economic drive to make change in the United States. And it is just a difficult truth. My
Yeah,
question is more on the kind of minutia level. With demographic and environmental measures and indicators globally being measured very differently, they're
yeah,
categorized differently, everything from age group to
mm,
to
yeah,
how the data is collected and what those criteria are.
yeah,
What is your approach to at the local level where we don't have the large data sets,
yeah.
which kind of normalizes, any differences,
Hmm.
but how are you approaching this piece of existing data sets versus collecting new data? And are you planning to report it up at the SDG level?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, again, great questions. We're launching a pilot project, which is, we call it an MVP, right? Minimum viable product, if you will, to really get this all going. We've been searching for other initiatives, and our goal is to totally collaborate with any initiative that's happening where we can find a similar effort. But this seems to be a stumbling block, frankly, around the world. At being able to really collect data in the way that it's needed. So I think this will all evolve, but clearly there's a need to make sure that whatever efforts are collecting this information is done in a way where it can all be shared and used by everyone else. The whole idea of the SDGs globally, and they do have these sort of set of standard metrics, as you saw with Sustainable Cities 11. But you're right, they may get measured a little differently in a community or a region or a country. All that normalization just it's going to need to evolve. We're going to have nothing's perfect. It won't be perfect initially, but if we can even get close, that's way, way better than where we are today. So that's kind of the whole thing. This needs to be an evolution, and we certainly want to, grow this hopefully to all of California. That would be our initial goal. We'd love to see California adopt this idea, and certainly on the climate end adopt this climate dashboard that it can then roll out to cities to help them with climate action plans at a minimum. so that they'd have standardized data and valuable data and validated data that they could help with managing and measuring their progress on their climate action plans, which today, everybody's struggling with. So great question.
Yeah. Talma.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm sorry I cannot be on camera at the moment, but as I'm hearing this very interesting presentation, I'm thinking about the power of perhaps centralizing these processes in communities, localizing these conversations within communities. It seems to me that if the conversations are global, or it may feel like that's not my problem kind of situation, where many people are already overwhelmed to start with. And so if it becomes more localized, within my city or even my neighborhood. And so I would like to propose, so the next session that you will be able to attend is my colleague Luisa Loro. And there is a really interesting process that I think could be very powerful for these kinds of conversations. Is an appreciative inquiry. And the idea is that you bring stakeholders, right, of communities in different sectors. And the magic of that is that you create a common goal and a common dream, right? And together you design a plan of action that can address some of those goals that are collectively clarified or specified or identified, right? So that way, it's built together, right? Everybody has a voice. It includes the goals and perspectives and dreams of everybody. And through the process, you are building collaboratives. People
100%.
get together more personally. It's a beautiful. I'm not preaching it because he's my colleague and I work with him and I love him, but I really believe that it's a beautiful process that yields a lot of great results.
You're exactly right, Toma. We're speaking the same language. I don't know if you saw in the presentation that our mantra is to think globally and act locally. And we do have this whole process of the UN has had called voluntary local reviews, where it's exactly as you're saying, community, residents get together and really share and do reviews of the issues, and it needs to be addressed at a community local level. I'm with you. I think that's again why this model is so powerful, and something that if we can really get it going and be able to roll it and get other cities on it, could be super impactful.
So I want to see if Stacy or Elizabeth has a question. Make some time for them.
No, not yet.
Not yet? All right, great. Well, any last question for Dave before Monica? Go for it.
Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. So something that's been coming into my consciousness over the last 3 weeks in very synchronistic ways that's new to me is regenerative economics. And there is Regenerative California and Regenerative Monterey. And I'm curious, is there any collaboration happening with that movement? Because it seems like regeneration is on a spectrum, right? Where sustainability might be in the middle, degeneration's off to the left, and then we've got regeneration up to the right. And how does that all relate to what you guys are doing?
Very much so. It's very tied to the circular economy, also, sort of concept. And so that's a very important thing for all of this. I got to tell you, there are so many groups, all right? But again, if we're open to this side of collaboration and we just reach out and continue to pull people in and figure out where is the win-win for both groups. One of the biggest roadblocks, by the way, on to the earlier question on why not collaboration, in my experience, whether in the business world or others, not enough people approach it from a truly win-win perspective. It tends to be what benefits one group a little more than the other, often. And you just have to really make sure that there's something in it for all sides. Great questions, and thank you all so much. And I look forward to further discussion whenever you'd like. And
Joe,
Joe's got
if
his
you've
hand
got
up.
a short question, because we're about to start Elizabeth in a minute, but if you've got a quick question.
I just want to make a comment about local action, the previous question. There is a company that's built a website called, it just flew out of my head.
You're talking about the emissions?
No,
Nature Quant, right?
Quant.
Right.
And what they do is, on a scale of 1 to 100, for every census tract in the country, identify how much nature there is. Where I live, it's around 2%. Many places are under 10% in Orange County and San Diego County. And they demonstrate that if we increase the nature score by 15%, we increase life expectancy by 1 year. So, in terms of local data, this kind of data to me seems fundamental, because if we can increase from 2 to 77%, we're increasing life expectancy of the people in that census tract by statistically 5 years. So there's some data like that, tracking nature-based solutions, if you will, that can be incredibly powerful and impactful.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. All right, Dave, awesome stuff. Thank you. You've raised some more questions for me, but I'll bring it up when we talk. Elizabeth, we're going to move into a slightly different direction, so please take it over.
I will. Different, and at the same time, it is very connected. So, Dave, thank you for setting this up so nice. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you see that now?
Yes. Sure.
Great. Okay. So my focus, I'm going to shift down to the organizational and community level primarily. I'm going to give an overview of the social accounting framework that businesses are starting to use in other parts of the world, who's using it, and then how to get started on it. And why is this change needed? To everyone's point, and why I got interested in the organizational level, right now, economic analysis and the balance sheet tend to be driving most decisions. But we know there's a lot of other resources: nature, knowledge, relationships, people. And so the economy is really embedded within those things, but they don't have representation in our decision-making frameworks. And the second reason is to diversify evidence and value. So what counts? Making sure that people's values are represented in the decision-making by expanding indicators and measures of success. And then pluralism has been mentioned. It's important to have multiple perspectives and try to find a way to reconcile those collaboratively and win-win solutions rather than bullying and domination. So this model is a multiple capitals is what's the hard at: social, natural, intellectual, it's a human, is a way to connect the levels by developing a holistic currency that can be used at any scale. And right now, the levels don't talk to each other. So, in the Doug's world of student health and well-being, they have certain, wellness measures. Communities have theirs, organizations have theirs, but there's no common currency that connects those. So this model offers that common currency. And so it's called integrated reporting. It's used in other places throughout the world, especially Japan, South Africa, and the UK. It combines quantitative data, qualitative data, and then visualizations of the data, as well as analyzing stakeholders to understand the mutual interests and shared opportunities, and then the process of how the different forms of resources are converted into value for individuals, organizations, and society. So there's several different models of using multiple capitals. I'm going to focus on the one from this accounting organization called International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation. It's the most well-developed, as you'll see as we're going through the examples. But they have 6 capitals: human, intellectual, social, financial, manufactured, and natural. And this is used in many parts of the world. And then in rural economic development, a model was developed around 2006 called community capital, where it takes multiple dimensions of well-being to show how it can be developed at the individual and community level. So the heart of the integrated reporting process then is transforming your resource inputs into outputs, outcomes, and impact in a way that creates positive change in the world. So the process of doing that is very important to visualize. And then another concept that's helpful to think about is that just like energy can change forms, right? Energy comes in different forms and it can be converted. Resources also come in different forms and can be converted as well from one into the other. So an example of what that looks like is this is research I did in Balboa Park in San Diego, where I'm from originally, how a small organization over a 15-year period at the collaboration of arts and culture organizations converted financial capital of $200,000 into ultimately $5 million annual revenue. And they did it through their programming, intentionally developing social capital, intellectual capital, and creative capital. And then through those programmatic efforts, they generated political capital and reputational capital as they became more well known. And then which ultimately made possible the economic return that they gained in a way that cycled back to provide financial returns to the organization, but also to society at whole, getting to this regenerative business model that Monica was talking about. And then ultimately, many companies are starting to connect that their work at the organizational level to larger frameworks such as the Sustainable Development Goals. And here, this is a model I've developed for San Bernardino, Cal State San Bernardino, where I'm at. And the piece that I think is missing in a lot of the models is the community level, the local action. So here in San Bernardino, our local framework that's getting good traction is from the Ripple Foundation. It's called Vital Conditions. And so there's a lot of collaboration about trying to come up with regional community well-being indicators for that. And then when it comes to pluralism, understanding other stakeholders' perspectives, a big part of the integrated report is the stakeholder analysis, where you identify who are our partners in creating value, because not just the firm doing it, but it's always in partnership with other people. And so who are you creating the value for? How do you engage with them? And what value do they bring to the organization? So this is an example from the Indiana Certified Public Accountants Society, a small nonprofit, where they analyze why they engage with their stakeholders, how they engage, and then the value exchange, the value they bring to the stakeholder, the value the stakeholder brings to the organization. So really a reciprocal relationship. And here is an example of another stakeholder analysis from Mitsubishi Motors, who's analyzing, who are the people that they are accountable to, how do they hold themselves accountable to these people, and how do they communicate with them. And then another reason I really like this model is it connects your accountability reporting to your performance management and strategic planning. So in this case, this is a company from South Africa. They have measures for all of the different capitals that they use, forms of capital, and then they measure the outputs. And then they also have key performance indicators where they say, what does success look like? How do we benchmark that so we know we're on the right track? And these can be very industry specific too, so tailoring is appropriate. And so the good news is that it was starting to get a little traction in the United States, integrated reporting. So Intel, this is from their 10K, I think it was 2020, yeah. And they show what are the different capitals we're using, recognizing the non-financial forms. How do we develop those and deploy them strategically in a way that can generate other forms of capital and value for the company and its stakeholders? This is from the Netherlands Post Office, PostNL, showing how they create resource inputs and transform them into service delivery and customer satisfaction in a way that ultimately supports the SDGs on the right-hand side. And then again, the Amsterdam airport. has used this model, showing its resource inputs, the conversion process through their business activities, the outputs that are making the company successful and remain viable, and then what does that do for the region, and again, connecting to the SDGs. And then Coca-Cola, this is from the Japan Coca-Cola. They look at their multiple forms of capital, and then have measures for them, the principal in the center here, and then have developed key performance indicators of what improvement is needed to achieve targets and goals for the coming year. And then Yamaha Motor has another example where they have the same conversion process. Let's see. And then operationalizing it down to the metrics. You know, this is an example I liked because it does show sort of how values are starting to be represented. So analyzing their human capital with one of the indicators being diversity, equity, and inclusion, creating strategies and measures for those to show, to achieve their goal. And then it's also been used at the programmatic level. The Alameda County Sheriff's Department is using this multiple capitals model for their community policing. And through this integrative thinking, they're starting to take up things like community gardening as a, you know, getting police involved in that, to have positive effect relationships with the community, getting to know people and build resilience. And then it's also a culturally attunable model. So it's not one size fits all. Different neighborhoods, communities will have different, these capitals will show up differently depending on different places. So this is from the Australia disaster recovery model, where they're showing the different forms of capital they use for disaster preparedness and disaster recovery. There's a sister publication from New Zealand, and while the framework is similar, the measures and graphics are different because it's attuned to New Zealand instead of Australia. And then for regenerative food systems, showing these multiple forms of resources and how they are converted to create a regenerative food system locally. And they use a permaculture with 8 forms of capital. And then last month we heard from New Zealand, and so this is their living standards framework. And you know, my vision, getting closer to what Dave said with the SDGs, is how can nations start using this as a policy making framework, right? So New Zealand was probably one of the most advanced in this with their living standards framework. And the origin of this was a capitals model where they were looking at different types of resources. Ultimately, after stakeholder engagement, they moved away from the capitals language because a lot of people don't like having humans, for example, referred to as capital. And so another example of local attunement is what language resonates with you. At Cal State San Bernardino, we use strength as our word instead of capital. And then this can also be mapped geospatially. When you get the data, so this is a project that I worked on in Phoenix, looking at community capitals, having measures for each one of the capitals, such as health coverage, language access, education, job training, educational equity, and early child development being the indicators for human capital. And we compared this with different other neighborhoods in Phoenix, and we were able to see equity gaps that way by comparing the different capital levels. And then at the personal individual level, this has become a model that's being used in recovery, addiction recovery, where they talk about personal capital, social capital, and community capital, and have data collection instruments so they can assess and quantify these different forms of capital for their patients and clients. and then turning those into indicators again. So personal capital would be, food, shelter, clothing, health and wellness, knowledge and skills. And then what are the dimensions that they would need to measure to make sure that those are all being addressed. And so for getting started, and this is really what I'm hoping is that we'll start taking this up. Read existing reports. So I've got some examples here to share with you. Becoming familiar and conversant in the different forms of capitals. And once you get these on your radar screen, you start seeing them everywhere. Oh, that's social capital. And so thinking in capitals is a useful tool. Think about how the various forms of capital show up in your organization. And there's a video resource I've got for how to do that from Mary Adams. Becoming familiar with your region's community well-being indicators. There's many different frameworks being used, but most communities have some sort of well-being indicators. Sketching out, then mapping out how does your organization convert these resources into community benefits. And knowing your stakeholders and understanding how you create and exchange mutual value with them. And so to the point that was brought up.
Want to try and wrap up soon so we can entertain some questions if we could.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
So this will, I think, taking this approach where we have these intangible and non-financial resources is something that can help shift our economy from a parasitic, extractive to a mutualistic, regenerative economy. And I will leave it there. So thank you.
Awesome. And just, I know people are going to ask, we will share those slides. I know there was a lot of dense information on them and a little hard to see. So don't worry. Yes, we will share the slides. And again, for those who joined midway, just want to encourage people to come on camera, try and limit it to one question first so that we can get as many people's questions as possible. So who would like to ask a question first? Joe, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. You said that you found equity differences in some of the measures. Have those been used to generate action, to drive action? And if so, what is that?
No, unfortunately, they have not been. And a lot of it comes down to funding, to Dave's point. So we did that project on a $4,000 budget, which was paid a graduate student basically to do the GIS coding and mapping. And right when we started to get traction with the city of Phoenix, then the person left, their director of sustainability. So it's been slow going, and we're trying to find somebody. Hopefully, I'm hoping to get it going here in San Bernardino. But to your point, Joe, not yet.
All right. Any other questions? Jorge.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Elizabeth. Very interesting presentation. Probably a lot of more questions that I could ask. But I really interested in this idea of the 6 capitals or the multiple capitals and how to measure that, which is the theme for today, how to metrics that. So that would be something interesting. But and what got my attention is your word about integration. How do you integrate that? What is the system or the way that you suggest communities or organizations integrate all those different capitals?
Well, the visual we used was called a spider diagram or a radial diagram where it showed all of the different capitals, and then you could see where your strengths were. But it also, by showing them holistically like that, you then start to recognize what are the potential synergies where you can have positive outcomes. They call it co-benefits, like feeding 2 birds with one hand. Through one action, you're building social and intellectual capital, for example. But also it makes where the trade-offs become necessary. So, or the trade-off choices, because usually there are tensions between the capitals when you're allocating resources. And right now that is hidden. Those tensions are not well visualized. And by having this kind of framework, it makes the tensions visual and gives it a tangible form so that you can recognize when we're investing in this, that means we're going to reduce the natural capital flows, for example, so people can think more long term. It's really a system for connecting the dots and thinking about impacts over time.
Yeah. Julie, hi.
Hi, good morning. Hi, Dr. Castillo.
Hello, how are
nice
you?
to see you. I was thinking about what you were sharing about the local and global frameworks, and as I'm processing that information, I'm wondering if metrics, if there are existing metrics that help bridge or translate across both levels, just to kind of bridge that gap sometimes between like the larger vision and the more local efforts, you know?
There are, so the Ripple Foundation does have some data sets on it, and you can, pick your community and then look at what the data sets are, and they go from the community level. Now, to me, the tension right now is there's not a good bridge between the organizational and the community level, right? So those really aren't talking to each other, but I think a lot of that, it hasn't been developed because we didn't even have a currency to talk about that. But with this multiple capitals framework, I think it's a bridge to help make those connections.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Monica, I saw your hand, but I'm going to ask a question first. So Elizabeth, and a lot of the examples you gave were large corporations that have the ability to do some sophisticated analysis. In those frameworks, which of course it was very hard to see all the details of, are they including some of the types of social capital that you're talking about, or are they deliberately omitting it so that people can't see it and measure it?
No, they include it. So for social capital, they have like stakeholder relationships, net promoter score. What are people saying about them? What is their reputation? So they're not hiding it. If I have to say that one criticism of the model, it doesn't do a good job talking about negative externalities. And so that's an opportunity for improvement, to be sure, but at least it shows you whether how the company is making money through value creation or value extraction. And personally, that's one reason why I think this model has not gotten uptake in the US, because Security and Exchange Commission has talked about doing natural capital and social and human capital protocols standards, and there's been so much pushback. And I think it's because a lot of companies in this country do make money through value extraction. And so they would not be interested. But for us to combat that, using this multiple capitals framework, I think, is a way to start holding them to the fire and showing the bad things they're doing.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Monica.
Elizabeth, you answered it. I'm good. Thank you.
All right. We have time for one more question before Stacy presents. Dave, do you have anything specific? Or Stacy?
I'm trying to think of there's so much really good info. So I look forward, frankly, to going through the presentation and probably wanting to have more discussion around it. I just keep coming back to the question asked earlier on what's blocking collaboration. I think it's such a key thing. And I had answered that one of the things is you got to get over those roadblocks of the money and the financial thing, but I also think proactively linking information, having more connective data can be a great way to drive people out of silos and into collaboration. And I wonder your thoughts on that.
Yes, I completely agree. And so I worked at the Balboa Park Cultural Partnership, where that model was from. And one of the inhibitors was time. Every organization is resource constrained, but there was a crisis. The city wanted to start charging rent to the museums, and so that got them all together. So the whole time they had this potential for social capital to be activated. But until there was a crisis, it wasn't. Once it was developed, then they were able to, and then through the programming, people, there was also a big culture shift in the park, where the organizations originally had a mental model as competitors. If somebody goes to your museum, they're not going to come to mine. Through this shared programming, they started trusting each other and seeing the possibilities of collaborative programming. Oh, well, maybe we could have, creative ways to get them to come to both of our museums. So it really expanded the mindset of what was possible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Excellent.
Yeah, the level of detail is mind-blowing to me. Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate it. And Stacy, welcome. Thanks again. And by the way, just want to say that all three of them, Elizabeth, Dave, and Stacy, have helped produce our chips and salsa, and also Catalina is on here also, and Doug, where we've done local events, trying to move it into off of Zoom and into in-person meetings. And Elizabeth has been doing some great follow-up for the Inland Empire with Doug, and Stacy and I just had an amazing group of people in Santa Barbara 2 weeks ago. Some of them are here, including Monica, and Dave was one of the first in Orange County to do that. So our goal is to, to combine a mix of these online educational events along with building connections across silos in person, and really trying to break down some of those silos. And got a couple of events I just want to plug before you start, Stacy, because I imagine we're going to finish right at the end. We've got 3 democracy events this month. Louis Alora, who's here, is going to be leading one. We put the link in earlier. We've got Sarah Jekyll, who's doing leadership training for high school girls, and to get them involved in politics and do inner work. And then Leslie Garvin, who's done like 20 years of community engagement projects about how to introduce joy and hope into democracy events. So hopefully you'll join us for some of those. And with that said, Stacy, it's all yours.
All right, well, hi everyone, and thank you for coming and joining this conversation. It's amazing to see so many people here interested in these ideas. Thanks, David, for putting this together. And I really appreciate Dave and Elizabeth for covering so much ground in this area. It's awesome to have had that background before I present what I'm going to show. Just a little about myself. I'm a recovering academic. I'm in Santa Barbara. I was doing research for about 15 years, but am now out in the real world trying to implement ideas. And one of the things many things that I'm working on lead in this direction, and my mind goes back to these things that are a little bit more research-like. So I work on these in parallel with some other work that I have going on. But for today, I'm going to share my screen and get my slideshow going and talk about a project that I've been working on, which it's a work in progress, and I'm calling it for now the Central Coast Wellbeing Indicator Framework. And I want to start off by saying that really what I'm here today to do is to invite any of you who are interested, whether you're in Santa Barbara or outside of Santa Barbara, to get involved in collaborating on creating these resources that can be held in commons, whether that's a global commons, a regional commons, a local commons. But I think there's a lot of work to do with all of these great ideas to actually be able to put them into practice in communities. And that's kind of what I'm focusing on. So
Stacey, before you go too much further, it just says loading on my screen.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Just I saw the slides.
Again, sorry. Also, while we're doing this, okay, let me try this again. I think maybe I had started the screen sharing before. David also has the links to my slides and to a graphic that you can share anytime, David. So
yeah.
People
I'll
can
send out an email afterwards with the video and all 3 slides.
Okay, are my slides showing now?
No, I think you might be right that you should start the screen share after you start slideshow, but perhaps you can also just leave it like this if you like, rather than.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Do you see my screen share?
I see the slides on the left, though.
It's
I
just
see
not
that.
in presentation mode. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're fine. Just go ahead and send
Okay,
it.
I should go back to that one then.
Yeah, I would.
Sorry, I'm losing
That's all
time.
right.
Um, uh,
It works.
okay.
Okay, although now we're getting something slightly different. Sorry. There you
All
go.
good. That's
Okay,
good.
we're good now.
Okay. So I'll just start with the question that started me down this path was a question that I started bringing up in conversations that David has been hosting online about what is well-being, and thinking about that on a deeper level, because I noticed we're all coming to these meetings talking about well-being, but I think we all bring like a slightly different perspective. And I always have a need to think about how do we integrate all of those perspectives. So that led me down the path that I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So I have a background in research and evaluation, even though I'm not really actively working in that area right now. But I have a big motivation to try to use data to support strategies for problem solving in the real world, for opening up creativity. And I just really appreciate the power of data to shape the conversation, whether that's like subtly or directly, and how important it is what we measure. So I wanted to just show a little bit here. These things are linked in my presentation, but on the right is a graphic done by a data visualization expert that I follow. And it's showing all the jobs in the US, the compensation for those jobs, average compensation, and the size of the circle shows the number of people working in that job, or the number of jobs in that area. And these things are like super interesting to look at, and they create new perspectives. The online version of this is interactive, really fun to play around with. The circles move around, so go and check it out later on if you'd like. But I think one of the things that data can show are something that is really dear to me. I work in food systems in a lot of my projects, and I think there are a lot of people passionate about food. And the first thing that comes to mind for people is farmers and how we need to support farmers when we're working on food. But if we look at the data, we can see that the food system, I've only highlighted two parts of it here, but one is farming and jobs in farming, and the other is jobs in food preparation and serving. And food preparation and serving as an industry just dwarfs farming like crazy. So if we try to approach the problem of the food system just from a farming perspective, we're going to miss so much. So information like this can be collected with data. I think that there are other things that we need to be aware of when we're thinking with data. And one is about what's not shown. So data helps direct what we see, and also can make things invisible. And one of the things that's invisible here is the graph on the left is showing the fraction of GDP that is labor versus non-labor activity. And more than 40% of GDP is not represented on the right. So not all of the income that people are receiving, or the productivity, is represented by labor. So there's 40% invisible, 40% of GDP that's invisible there. And how that would be distributed and how many people are sharing it, you can't really see that. And you can go beyond that and look at unpaid labor. So there's quite a bit of work on this. An estimate for 2024 was that was $1 trillion worth of value at the current undercompensated rates. So if you go to living wage rates for all of that work, maybe at least 14% of GDP. And even then, that doesn't include all the other types of unpaid labor. And like the labor that some of us are doing here today, or all of us maybe some of you are paid to be here, but many of you probably aren't. And we do a lot of things that we don't get paid for that we think are contributing value, and those things don't get captured here. So that was my one digression to kind of illustrate why I think data is so important, why it's important to think deeply and ask questions and really think about what we measure and what we show with the data. The other thing that I'll say is that I actually also really appreciate the collective intelligence that has come before. And my project here is mostly about trying to capture collective intelligence and make it possible to put into practice, because we already know so much about all of these factors, but somehow we're not getting a lot out of them yet. And then I'm also interested in community ownership. So I'm interested in helping to create things that are owned by the community that can provide value to everyone. So in terms of well-being evaluation, what have I done so far? Well, I was interested in what do we already know. So in the first box, I've gathered information about a bunch of different frameworks. David contributed to this. He sent me a big list that he had gathered, and I gathered more information about those. And then on the top right, I identified a lot of unique concepts that are represented in those frameworks. So what are, all these frameworks measure things slightly differently, and can we create a full catalog of what people are measuring when they're trying to evaluate well-being? Then I did a little bit of comparison of the different frameworks, and I made a first attempt at organizing all the concepts that I identified. So that's what I'm going to show you today, kind of where I am right now. There's a list here of the main frameworks that form the source of this data. There are a lot more frameworks, and there are some California specific ones that I think I still need to evaluate, or someone who wants to collaborate can also help with bringing this information in. But the list there tries to span both the big international frameworks, like you all heard a lot today about the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. There are several other big international efforts like that, but then there are some traditionally indigenous rooted frameworks, and there are much more local focused frameworks. So I tried to gather good representations from across all of that. And with those, I identified a few dimensions of analysis. So I split them into two parts. On the left are the domain and the worldview. I kind of gathered them. So to what degree are they measuring individual versus collective well-being, or short-term versus long-term, local versus global? These conversations have come up just in the two presentations that you saw before. So I looked at those domains, and again, I have all of this available to share if you're interested in where I am on all of those so far. And then also some measurement things. So do they measure in breadth or depth, subjective versus objective, expert versus participatory measurement, the trade-offs between data standardization and conceptual depth? And I don't have time to talk about all of that for sure. So what I wanted to do was just give you one example of kind of what that looks like in terms of how I'm thinking about all of these potential sources of well-being indicators. And this is related to individual versus collective well-being. So if I look at those main sources that I have been evaluating, they kind of span a range between focus on individual versus collective. Some of the big internationally driven ones focus a lot at the individual level and much less at the collective level. Some of the indigenous-centered frameworks focus so much more at the collective level and don't really consider the individual level very much. And then there are a few that probably intentionally are kind of situated right in the middle of that spectrum. They are trying to balance the individual versus collective and include measurement on both of those ends of the spectrum. So just like moving quickly through here, because I'm not here to teach you about what I've learned so far, so much as invite you to contribute what you know to an effort to help make it easier to evaluate well-being and share what we know. I created a graphic which actually looks better on a white background, as I'm seeing here, but it took the 46 different unique concepts that I identified through the earlier analysis I mentioned. And those on this diagram, which maybe David will share a link to.
I popped it in the chat, yes.
Perfect. So you can look at this in more detail for yourself, and that also has some links to the documents that these are based on. But if you look, there are 5 dimensions, kind of categories of dimensions in the center, human well-being and ecological well-being being 2 that indices often polarize around. Relational well-being can incorporate those too, or just be focused on human relations. And then I would say those are maybe the most foundational types of indicators, but then there are also some related to the way to, or the ways to create the kind of well-being in those three domains. And those are related to economic transformation or governance and justice. So this is like a three-level hierarchy of concepts that I've identified, and I can't say that this is the best way to represent this information, but it's a first start. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about now is why I think this is valuable, or how it could be translated into something that's useful. And I'm going to use an example from one of these dimensions that maybe you haven't thought about so much in the context of well-being, but it's something that people measure, that we can measure, and that's meaningful work. So if we zoom all the way into meaningful work, what do we usually talk about when we're talking about meaningful work? People before have identified some things such as work autonomy. So how many decisions do you get to make about what you do at work? Skill utilization. Are your skills used well, or are you doing work that isn't what you're most skilled at? And how does your work align with your values? Those are three, not the only three. But this leaves aside other things that we often measure about work, which are under other indicators, like how much you get paid, for example. That's an important part of it. But meaningful work is intended to prescribe a different set of things that contribute to well-being. So what I'm hoping to show you now in this next couple of slides is just the kinds of resources that I think it would be useful to have and share related to, let's say I want to measure if people have meaningful work or they're finding meaning in their work. So the first thing is just some readings. There are some good places to find out how people are thinking about meaningful work. And if those resources are in a place that's easy to access, that provides a really easy way to get started with thinking about measuring this. There's also quite a bit of existing data, although when we get all the way down to the local level, which is actually my area of interest, is being able to do some of this work locally, those data sets aren't always available or parsable down to the local level. And this is not the only existing data. And I think the work that is to be done, which I've started on, but would welcome help with, is identifying all of these existing data sets that could be put to use toward evaluating these things. But then when data isn't available, I think one thing to do is collect it. And again, starting without a good foundation can mean that you do things that aren't very useful, or you collect the data in the wrong way and you actually can't use it, or you can't compare it with another source of data. So I think that surveys are a way that people collect data. There are a ton of instruments that can be used at this level for meaningful work. And I think what the goal would be at a local level is to identify all the potential ways to ask those questions and maybe agree as a community on how we would like to ask the question. So that if I'm doing a workforce development project and someone else is, and we're asking the same question of whoever the community is that we're working with, we can actually compare across or start to get a better sense of a community-wide level of well-being in a particular dimension. Then I think surveys have their limitations, absolutely. And there are other ways that are more open-ended of getting information like this, and these get even harder to do well. So having a set of resources that lower that threshold for people to be able to collect this type of data. I think just having questions is not enough. There's also some aspect of learning how to ask data these ways, but gathering the shared resources that make it possible to do that kind of efficiently and having a structure for it is of value. And then there's another area that I think is really underutilized, and this is asking people to tell their stories. This is actually a way to minimize a little bit more the influence of the person who's asking the questions and get at truths You don't have to ask about a concept, you just ask for a story, and then you can see what the truths are or what the concepts are that are mentioned. Again, this requires some skill development to be able to use it, but these things, if there are resources developed, it makes it much more tangible for people actually working in communities, nonprofits with a really low budget, small businesses, just groups of citizens who want to do something. If the resources are already partly developed, it moves things ahead a lot, getting us to the place where we can start measuring what's important rather than just relying on what has been measured for us or trying to extrapolate from there.
Thank you. We should probably wrap it up so we could get to some questions.
Absolutely. I just want to mention the last 2 slides. So I have questions for you that I welcome comments on. I will put that up in just a moment. But I also wanted to mention that the last slide is about ways to get involved at whatever level you might be interested in. So those are there. The slides will be available, and I would love to hear from any of you. Happy to take questions or hear your thoughts about my questions.
Okay, very good. Do you want me to leave these slides up while we're chatting?
Not necessarily. We can put them up if people run out of their own things to say.
All right, perfect. So who has some questions? Let's do questions for just Stacy first. And thank you, Stacy. Thank you, of course, all 3 of you. But it's apparent how much work each of you are putting into this, and this is not something you just casually put together for a Thursday morning presentation. This is something you've been putting a lot of sweat equity into. So any questions for Stacy? Elizabeth.
That is fantastic, Stacy. I really enjoyed that, and I appreciate all the work you've done, and you really explained your methodology so beautifully. I was wondering if you've used artificial intelligence to help you analyze any of this.
That is a great question. I have, yes. I used it to help gather the sources and also do some of the concept extraction. And for my PhD work, I actually used the pre-generative AI that's available for everyone. I did language modeling. I studied news stories and images about climate change. So I'm really familiar with what the potential power of that is. And I think that's this is a good use to put that tool to, kind of crunching all of these concepts.
Well done.
Dave.
I'm going to follow that up, Elizabeth. Yeah, Stacy, also really enjoyed it. Love the approach, love the system thinking, and love all of this. I had the exact same thought, and especially when you had the chart with the 48 different, sort of frameworks, was thinking, wow, what if you put all that into ChatGPT and said, give me the best, out of all of this that's the same or very, relevant, or, and just play with it and see it. So I didn't know if that's something you've actually done, but yeah, it seems like with all of this research work, there's so much opportunity for that kind of dialogue these days. And yeah, it'd be interesting.
Absolutely. So those of you who know me well know that I do use AI quite a bit to some of these tasks.
Yeah.
I am, however, a skeptic, and I think everything needs to be reviewed by humans after.
Right.
I think that AI really tends to go toward the common denominator, the average, whoever's voice is most dominant already. And it's important to constantly be aware of that and really do your best to get around it or to leverage the strengths that it has to look for the hidden things. But I use it, but with caution.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. And just would want to add, we brought up collaboration. There's so much here among just even the 3 of us, right? I'm sure others here in the group that, we all could really benefit from spending some good time together and collaborating. So I want to thank you both for that and everybody else.
Well, might be curious before we go to Joe's question, just to get a little floaty heart from everyone who is really interested in collaborating on metrics here, just as a little metric of what's going on. Look at that. Okay, someone had a heart explosion. I hope you're okay, whatever that was. All right. Well, looks like Dave, you're right that there's people who want to collaborate. Joe, got a question for Stacy.
Yes. First of all, sending hearts.
Yes, drive safely.
As I was listening to you, Stacy, I was plugged into the donut economics model. There are two key frameworks. One is the Earth systems, if you will, articulated by the planetary boundaries work, and the other is the equity measures that are sort of inside the donut in that model. CalDEC, the California Donut Economics Coalition, is working locally in every community, or in many communities, trying to define the measures of equity inside the donut. I think Lancet, in their work on health systems, health of humans and other life forms on the planet, really has some powerful similarity to where you came to. So I'm not sure what my question is, but have you plugged into the donut economics folks and to the planetary boundaries folks to further your thinking, and for that matter, Lancet, who've tried to plug in their version of what sits inside the donut, that is the equity measures and the health of life measures.
And Stacy, before you answer, it might be good to hear from Brian Dowling, who's been one of the leads on CalDEC for many years. So Brian, I see you raised your hand anyway, but I don't know if you wanted to respond.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to do, have a chance to. Yeah, CalDEC is very, very close to finishing off on a statewide donut for California for all of what was just mentioned, the physical boundaries based on the Stockholm Resiliency Center planetary boundaries, and also the social foundations, which are based upon the SDGs for the United Nations. We are doing the final polishing on it right now, and I had already planned on sending everybody who made a presentation here a copy of that report because I see so much chances for collaboration here, and this seems like there's fantastic opportunities, and I'm very excited to be in contact with you guys again. I'm really excited about how well this report is coming out, and like I said, we're just tweaking a few things here and there, and it's going to be sending it. We're working with a team in Australia who's doing our final polishing. All right. Thanks so much.
Oh,
look forward to receiving it. Thank you.
All right. So Stacy, give you a chance if you want. Just add
Yes. Yes. So thank you both, Brian and Joe. Those were great comments. And I have read a lot of donut economics work, and donut economics framework was one of the ones that is the basis of what I presented today. It was on the list. And I think that my kind of the different direction that I'm taking, I haven't adopted any particular framework in my own work. It's more like I'm trying to create the menu that can be useful and relevant for people working in the details down in communities to say, look, these are all the different ways that you could think about well-being and evaluating it. And, you have the chance to pick and choose. You can order a la carte from this. That doesn't mean that the work, the donut economics work at the higher level isn't valuable. It absolutely is. But sometimes that's really hard to apply down in the detailed level. And it's hard for that to be really community responsive because of the need to be standardized. But down in the real details in the communities, I don't know, I think there's value in having flexibility and representing a lot of different frameworks in what's possible and allowing the community to decide what works for them with respect to their project or the population that they're working with.
Erin. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. This was very interesting, Stacy, and I appreciate the amount of work that went into it. And what I'm thinking about now is like, is it metrics or goals, like sustainable development goals, and then we're using metrics, and there's a pretty important difference between the concept of measuring versus the concept of deciding what we're going for. Yeah, maybe that's the question. Like, what do you think is more important to be on the same page about? Or is it important that everyone in this community sort of share the same specific goals? It's probably clear enough. Thanks.
All right. Well, I'll try to answer that by kind of the way that I think about most things is that there's a lot of value in being networked, but also decentralized. So providing as much decision-making ability to people all the way at the edges of the network or, kind of the end of the diagram. So I am actually super interested in what it is, what is well-being. I don't think the question is answered definitively. So I think that needs to be an ongoing conversation. But my idea with this is to try to take that conversation all the way down into people working in small projects and communities. Like they can see, these are all the ways people have thought that we could, these are all the factors related to well-being. These are the ways people have thought about measuring them. And what do you think? Like what's going to make sense in the context of your project? So I hope that efforts like all the ones that we have talked about today and others, they keep both in mind, I guess, the ability to add new ideas or new ways of thinking about what well-being is, while still also maintaining the rigor needed for measurement.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Stacy. I have one question for all three of you, but just want to thank everyone for coming first and for all the interest. And obviously, there's a lot of excitement about collaborating and improving and advancing all these things. So to that spirit, and just keep it under a minute each so we could get everyone out on time. Dave, what would you like to see WEAll California do to help advance these ideas?
Well, I mean, I think, David, honestly, I think what you're doing is on the right path. Putting these regional groups together and starting to spread the word. And I know you mentioned trying to get it as much local as you can, but Zoom works, and I just think there's a need to continue its marketing, and so we're needing to keep pulling people together, getting out of our own little, areas, if you will, and figuring out how to really combine. And then I guess the next thing would be how to create some kind of a more strategic plan, perhaps. I'd say would be a helpful thing.
Awesome. Elizabeth, how about you?
Well, I would love to see WEAll start finding a way to make visible its intangible resources, like all the effort you put in, David, and the human effort, and so through its impact reporting and accountability reporting, that would be my goal. But I concur with Dave that I think you're awesome, and that organization has been doing fantastic.
We're all awesome. We're all here. We're all making this happen. So, Stacy, how about you?
I'm going to concur with all of that and say thank you, David. You're doing so much, and the organization more generally. The thing that I'm not even, I don't have a way that this can happen, but I think it's important to keep present. I think those of us who show up to these meetings and these conversations, we're a self-selecting group. We have the privilege of showing up to them. And there are so many perspectives on something like well-being that just are not represented here. And any ways that we can do a better job of keeping those perspectives present, even if the people can't be, and hopefully finding ways to have people present who represent those perspectives, that would be amazing, but very hard.
Excellent point. Yeah, thank you. Thanks to all three of you for all the work you're doing and showing up today. And Brian, hopefully when you're ready, you'll let us know you want to share some details with our group. And thank you, everyone. Great great session. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Appreciate you all.